we're all sitting there, like there's 25 or so of us there, and here's Dallas Willard standing right in front of us, and his first words were, "My prayer for each of you is you will never be in a hurry again." And he just stopped. And we kind of all looked at each other like, oh, wow.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Being Formed podcast. My name is Adam Ormord, and today's conversation is one that feels deeply personal to me. When I was stepping into the early years of my own formation as a spiritual director, there was a season where I met regularly with a man who shaped me in lasting ways. His name is Todd Spencer. In those spiritual direction sessions from 2012 to 14, I experienced something rare, a presence that didn't push or perform, a witness who could hold silence and let God speak, a guide who trusted the Spirit more than his own words. I didn't know it then, but I was being formed into the kind of spiritual director I would become. In the years since, Todd has continued to develop his own practice, and he actually started his own ministry called Headwaters of Hope, where he walks alongside leaders, pastors, weary souls who need to rediscover rest, clarity, and the love of God. Todd's part of the Anamkara community of spiritual directors, which some of you will know through the work of Tara Owens. Todd was recently interviewed by Tara, and just hearing his own voice again reminded me why I trust him so deeply. I had to get him on this show. Todd cares for the people who care for others. And so today we're going to talk about his story, the heart behind Headwaters of Hope, and what it means for leaders to be led back to the headwaters, those first quiet places where God's life is born in us again. So do yourself a favor, pull up a chair, have a seat at the table, and enjoy this conversation with Todd. Well, Todd Spencer, it is so good to see you on the other side of this screen and to welcome you to the Being Formed podcast. How you doing today, Todd?
Loving life, man. Been watching it snow all morning long.
First big snow, yeah?
Beautiful big snow, yeah.
Tell everyone where you live, man, so they know that, where the snow's falling.
Yeah. This is Colorado Springs, Briargate.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at my desk in my basement, and I look out the window to the left of my monitor, and I'm watching these beautiful little songbirds eating from my red bird feeder, and I look to my right where I usually can see Pikes Peak and some beautiful aspen trees, and but I can't see Pikes Peak right now. It's too much snow going on out there.
I live up just north from you, up in Denver, a little less snow, but it is exciting to have the first real snowfall of the year. It's been too long. And so, I don't know, it just does something for my soul. We were told it was going to start to snow in the middle of the night. And so I got up a few times, just kind of looked out I was thinking if I wake up and it's midnight and I see that snowfall, and I might just want to go sit out in the living room, turn off the lights. There's just something about that stillness and the peacefulness of that. So that was a good feeling, just to know snow's coming and we get to enjoy something fresh, something really beautiful to behold. So how is it with your soul, Todd?
Well, God's been working on me in some new ways over the last period of time. This is still a new chapter for me. Beautiful things happening for my sons that have now grown up and striking out on their own. I'm so proud of both of them. One's a nurse in Sioux Falls, and one's a new officer in the Army, and going through his training out in Georgia. And both of the gals in their lives are just precious people. We're enjoying getting to know them better, and my wife is thriving in her work as an instructional coach and supervisor in a school here in town. And I'm growing my practice in spiritual direction and coaching and retreat leading, and discovering all the joys and struggles of, being on my own and making ends meet the way they need to. And so far, so good.
Well, Todd, you mentioned that you're doing spiritual direction like full time coaching, and you're venturing out. We're going to talk about some of what ministry looks like for you, and the name of your ministry is such an incredible name. Everything that you're doing, I'd love to just before we get into that, have you share a bit of your own journey into spiritual direction or formation, soul
Yeah.
care. What did the life of ministry look like for you?
Yeah. I think the way I like to start that part of a conversation when somebody asks me about that, I had this diverse community of adults in my life as a teenager back in Oklahoma where I was growing up, that made a life lasting impact on me. Lots of different kinds of folks, people that were senior pastors that worked with teenagers, youth ministers, youth directors, lay people that were volunteered in youth ministry. And I'd go to church camp at Camp Egan, just east of Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And I still consider it my spiritual home. Camp Egan is such a beautiful place. Anyway, sixth grade all the way through 12th grade, these folks that volunteered and worked at the camp, we would go take a group from our church, and all the other churches would bring volunteer adults also, and we'd team up and have this great camp. And this group of adults that loved teenagers taught us all these contemplative practices. So I mean, even in middle school, so I was learning things like centering prayer, breath prayer, heart prayer, creating our own heart prayers, opening oneself to God in solitude, all of these things that we just did every year at church camp and at leadership camps and stuff. And I loved it. And it made a big difference in my life. And it helped me through some rocky times as a high schooler. There was my girlfriend in high school had leukemia, found out she had leukemia and eventually died just before I went to college. But all the way through that, these people that were in the Methodist church and the Methodist conference there and in my local church really were the ones that came through for me. And they taught me practices that I fell in love with, although I didn't practice them. I just thought they were great. It was a great thing to do at camp. Doesn't everyone have this experience at camp? It didn't take too long. I realized no, not most people don't. But so I felt called into ministry of some sort, and I didn't know what that might look like. But I knew I wanted to go to college and go to seminary, and which I did, and got out of seminary and started my full-time work in youth ministry. And about 7-8 years into that, I tapped out. It was like, it's so many of us that work in youth ministry or in any kind of ministry. We think we've got, oh man, I have so much creativity and it's endless, and I'll make a difference. And about 7-8 years into it, I looked around and said, my gosh, if this is as good as it's going to get, I don't think this is good at all. I may need to change what I'm doing altogether. And so I went to my first spiritual director at this point. So in my late 20s, I was probably 27, 28. And I told my story and I'm just struggling with anxiety and depressive symptoms, and going to a counselor, or go to this spiritual director. And I tell my story to my spiritual director, and I don't know, it was like the third time I saw him, and he paused. He looked at me at one point and said, now, how you told me about those practices that you loved learning and that they're really important to you. Todd, have you ever thought about practicing them? He laughed. I laughed first, and then he laughed. And I said, well, I think that's a really good point. I think it's time. And so for probably 15 years after that, mostly in secret, because most people in local church It's kind of isn't it a kind of a strange thing that a minister, full-time minister, could say, people aren't really excited to come to church and find their minister with the door closed in prayer. And being a youth director, youth minister at the time, that no, you should be producing.
Yeah.
No, there's none of that. Nobody wants somebody that's just going to be in prayer, like what, Anyway, so mostly I started practicing my practices, centering prayer and Lectio especially, and then spiritual direction. I didn't talk about it with anybody else, but I did that, and it not only allowed me to survive. I started finding that God was through these practices of contemplative rhythms and practices that my heart was finding healing, and I started to find purpose and joy that I didn't have in my life previously. And so over my years of ministry, I did 30 years of local church ministry. I just gave myself more and more to that, to contemplative practices, not only in solitude, but also in groups and my leaders, my volunteer teams. And I just planted seeds like those wonderful folks did for me back when I was a teenager. I planted seeds, rarely would see the outcomes, but just trusted that here's some seeds. And, I'd look at a teenager that's like, why are we doing this? And I'd say, hey, it's okay. Just, why don't you just give yourself to it? You may set it aside for another time in your life, but how about it just giving yourself to it just to see what happens? Yeah. And so over time, I just wove my ministry life, not only my personal life, but my ministry life into rhythms that were more humane, which are the contemplative rhythms. So I'll stop there. I kind of rambling on there.
It sounds like the rhythms were opening up space for you. But what would you say, as you look back on that now, was the change or the change agent there?
In my mind, I think probably at the core of all contemplative Christian practices and across other traditions as well, probably too, but as a follower of Jesus in his way, I think the core of the practices of prayer practices, contemplative practices, is a slowing down. And you used the word a second ago too, is allowing more spaciousness in my inner life, so that I may notice, and sometimes not notice, but trust that the Spirit of God is always present, and my core identity is beloved.
Yeah, my
core identity is cherished, beloved one of God. And it, at least for me, and I think it's a similar story for a lot of folks that come to contemplative rhythms, it allows me to be a better version of myself when I'm with my wife or with my kids or with my directees or those I serve next to, my neighbors. The more my allowing spaciousness with God's Spirit in everyday life happens, the more at ease I am in my own skin. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's the slowing down to a humane pace. Yeah. And frankly, not much of the world understands that. So it's not necessarily a given that people will want to hear about it or want to learn about it. But as you know, as another contemplative, there are plenty of folks out there that are hungry and thirsty. Yeah. They're just really, really aching for a different way to live with God, rather than just in our head ascending to belief statements and saying who's in and who's out. and in the ministry world beyond, the professional. How much more money could I make if I take this position or that position? You know, setting those things aside and just being a child of God in God's presence by allowing spaciousness that's already there, but allowing myself to enter it.
Yeah, I was one of those people, broken, working in ministry, suffered a lot of setback, a lot of heartache, my own doing and kind of undoing, unraveling. It felt like God, by His grace, brought me to Colorado Springs. Back in like 2012 to that 2014 window, found my way to a basement office at a downtown church in Colorado Springs, Methodist Church, First Methodist. And I think you were working on your doctorate at the time, because I just remember stacks of books like all around your office. And I thought, wow, this guy's really, I don't know if I'd ever been, in proximity to someone who was working on their doctorate at that time. And so just books everywhere. That's what I remember. But I actually remember more than that. I remember the spaciousness of that office, that space that you opened up for me to explore the inner life, who I was, that core identity that you talked about. The very beginning, I think that's really part of the beginning of my journey out of that chaos and darkness. And so I have you to thank. And so everybody who's listening, you guys need to realize this is a special conversation I get to have with Todd. I feel like we've come full circle in a way. Well, I was thinking about those years that when you were offering spiritual direction in that basement, you were also serving youth at the time in the church. What was forming in you even then that you maybe didn't have language for yet, but here you are now, all these years later? Anything you pick up on?
I did my training for spiritual direction back in 2005, 2006. It was the year before we moved here to Colorado Springs, and the year after I worked with Shalem to get my completion certificate with them. So I started formal spiritual direction back then. And for most of those years, I worked in youth ministry. And frankly, I still really have this ease of love for young people. I never lost that. And like, I'm just one of those adults that it's kind of fun for me to be a forgiving adult is an adult, not trying to be a kid with them, but being a friend of young people. I never lost that, and I still have that. What I discovered though was, I just wanted to do more with those that were hungry for spiritual direction. I was doing it part-time, just on the side, or even as a gift to people, for all those years. And I was like, I just want to do more of this. I love what happens when I invite someone into slowing down and noticing those fingerprints of the Spirit all over their lives, and get to be the one that says, no, you really are beloved. You really are. I hear these struggles you're having. And most of my directees are in ministry themselves. I know how that can be dry, and I know how you can feel alone. And did you hear what you just said about that experience you had on the trail yesterday, or whatever it is? Did you hear the energy in your voice? Did you notice that your heart lifted a little bit? What was that like? And by the way, is that God? Yeah, it wasn't in your office at work. It was out there on the trail, or it was in the car with your teenage son, or, and so people are just hungry, thirsting for someone to say, something like that. Like, oh no, I think God's present.
Yeah.
I think God's already doing stuff with you. And I'm not real directive. I usually do a lot more listening than talking. I do some directive things in direction, but mostly it's just saying, oh, hey, let's hit the pause button.
Yeah.
I just noticed something. I noticed the energy that you just had with that story you just told me, or I just noticed your tears. Can you say more? Will you say a little bit more about what's going on with those tears? Folks are so alone in ministry, especially, I think. But that, of course, you're hearing this. I know what it was like to be in ministry with a director, a spiritual director. And I also knew what it was like to have one. And now I get to be one that's my full work, is to be at someone's side, whether they're in ministry or other. They're not all in ministry, but most of them are.
Yeah.
I get to be the one that it slows it down, and they notice a little bit more, and sometimes they feel like, oh wow, maybe God is in this. So anyway.
That's it, man. Well, your ministry, you have launched out not too long ago into your own ministry called Headwaters of Hope. Headwaters of Hope. What a beautiful name, Todd, evoking some great imagery. I want to talk about this, these headwaters, like the place where like a river begins, right? And typically small or kind of hidden or quiet. Like I would just love to hear you talk about like why the name, kind of how does that name or that imagery guide your ministry philosophy?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I'm a fly fisherman, and sometimes I catch fish. So I love fly fishing, and I fly fished for a good while before I learned how to catch trout on a fly rod. But I love fly fishing, and over the years, my favorite waters are those smaller waters that are up higher. The fish aren't necessarily as big. Sometimes they are. You'd be surprised at some of the small creeks and streams that you might catch a pretty good sized fish. But mostly I love the solitude, the freshness of getting to those higher elevations, the clarity of the water. My style of fishing, I'm in the water. I'm walking slowly in the water, up, 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 up. And that also means I'm farther away from people when I'm fly fishing in those waters. Because most people, they fish, they want to go to like they come from out of state to Colorado. They want to fish on a big stream because that's more often you're going to catch big fish. And you get these wonderful photos where someone's holding a fish in their hands out towards the camera so it looks really big. So usually you don't have to do that, but that happens. I might be guilty of that occasionally. But anyway, most people want to come to Colorado to fly fish on these bigger streams to catch big fish. I like going on these back roads and up into the mountains and some quiet places, and usually require some hiking in to get away from the busyness. Headwaters of Hope, that kind of speaks to that. My heart for moving into those kind of spaces, and in spiritual direction is kind of like doing that. It's guiding people into a more spacious, open, less hurried moment. Hopefully, I don't necessarily make anything happen, but I'm just kind of helping the person open to that possibility, and in a conversation and in some silence. You and I were speaking before we hit record about, I have a little bit of a liturgy that I follow. I hesitate a little bit to call it that, but it's moving into some moments of grounding, letting some of the energy go, centering on the spirit, some silence, a little bit of music, usually instrumental music, and as much silence as the directee would like before we enter into a conversation. Headwaters are that it's that kind of speed and that kind of being enveloped, hopefully.
Yeah, I get that imagery of like slowly wading in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a full person activity. It's body, mind, and heart. And fly fishing's like that. And so is spiritual direction. I mean, it's, when somebody's new to spiritual direction, a lot of times they think, well, yeah, I'm not really that religious, or I'm really religious, but I'm drying on the vine. And they think that maybe spiritual direction is about their religiosity, following the rules that are required, and I get to be the one that says, no, this is about all of who you are as a beloved of God. It's about all of you, not just how you follow the rules or not. It's about where God's showing up in every little aspect of your life. And when we get into these higher waters, these higher altitudes and these quieter spaces, we start to notice more of the good of our life. So yeah, that's kind of where that came from. I think it is. And on my website, Headwaters of Hope, I wrote an article when I first founded Headwaters of Hope. And that's what it's called. It was published in Presence Magazine, the Spiritual Directors International, a couple of years ago. So there's a little article about fly fishing and spiritual direction there if people want to kind of explore that a little bit.
Oh, I'd love to be able to link to that. So
yeah.
Make sure I get that in the show notes, man.
Okay.
As your ministry then has taken shape the last couple of years, what surprised you, including a bit of like the kind of people who God is kind of sending your way, I mean, I'm curious, who are you noticing are coming to these headwaters with you, and what's particularly surprising to you about this?
Well, the first thing that has been a real joy that comes to mind as you ask that, is a year and a half ago, I started a program with IPEC, which is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And I did a certification program with them for leadership coaching. That's the newer part of my work. As a coach, the training I got through IPEC, for one, it was such a cool discovery. I couldn't have picked a better training program. It's based on core energy coaching, which is we're trained to look at 7 different pathways, 7 different energies, 7 different doorways of energy, and in the center of all of it is this experience of fully being in the moment, which is level 7. It's kind of it's pure presence, and how it feeds all the other energies. And so anyway, it's studied scientifically, and it works. For one, it's showing coaching through this model is very powerful, and it changes people's lives. Secondly, for me, even though the language around the 7 levels of energy isn't particularly Christian, but the contemplative tradition and the mystical tradition is all over it through how I read it. So one of the surprises has been working with for instance, a founder of a tech company, or the founder of a research firm that researches for hedge funds, an executive in HR in high tech firms in San Francisco, or anyway, I've been working with other kinds of leaders that weren't coming to me necessarily for spiritual direction,
Okay.
but for coaching. And I get to invite them into slowing down and discovering new options and new kinds of energy they can pull from
Mm-hmm.
or draw upon in their leadership or in their with their family or whatever. So the coaching has been really cool because
Mm-hmm.
it's brought me into a close relationship, up close with leaders I wouldn't have necessarily been next to in spiritual direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's one surprise that's been just a delight.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I keep noticing is how many more people in ministry come to me. And I mean, it's been true for a long time. Most of my directees have been in ministry, but now it's like it's a huge portion of my spiritual direction work. And I, let's see how to say it. You know how grandparents love having a grandkid at their house, and then at the end of the day, the grandkid goes home.
Mm-hmm.
And the joy a grandparent has, and I'm not a grandparent yet. We're hoping for this, but I've watched it and heard people talk about it for a long time. And, it's like, oh, I can be the one that just loves on them, and then I can just let them go home. I don't have to be their parent. Well, with ministry leaders, I have a bit of the same kind of joy. It's kind of like, oh, I get to love on them and give them hopefully this loving place to talk and discover God's fingerprints, and then they get to go home, and I don't have to stay at church. I'm still, you can hear some of it. I'm still finding healing from, I was laid off for my last job in the church after my boss retired, and the new folks came in and rearranged everything. It was a very difficult time, that first year especially. There's still some healing around that, and not just around that last year, but really around my whole ministry. There's still some healing that's going on with me, but it's like, oh wow, I get to be one of those people for them, and I don't have to be in the middle of all those layers of anxiety and stress in the local church anymore. I mean, my wife Debbie and I go to a church. We go to a little Episcopal church here in town that we absolutely love, and I love going, and then I love coming home, and I don't have to. So I'm finding such new freedom as I'm being healed from some of those layers of experience that I had. But anyway, I that's been fun. God still, and I didn't necessarily I didn't choose that as my specialty of being a spiritual director for people in ministry, but that's just what's happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, so those are a couple of things that have been fun and surprising to me.
I love hearing that you're having an opportunity to coach leaders. So you're having this wide cross section of leaders from tech world, from kind of business or marketplace leadership roles, all the way to ministry leadership. And one thing I feel like leaders have in common, for the most part, is this productive, high speed. They have the propensity to move fast, solve problems quickly, right? And so there's this hurry, and there's this invitation. Really, I think that you're offering them into a space where they can first of all slow down and experience a bit of soul rest, or kind of awakening to their soul. And on your website, you've got a whole tab dedicated to retreat. So that's a big piece of your ministry. I want to talk a little bit about retreat with you, and especially this idea of the invitation to slow down. Why is that invitation to slow down something that is both hard to receive and then hard to kind of like live into? I mean, so you're really trying to model this for them in a retreat setting. Just talk to me about what that's like when you bring up this conversation of rest.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I do lead retreats for groups occasionally, and I love that. Probably the the most fruitful, I think, right now in my work with Headwaters has been the retreat in solitude for folks that a lot of times the first time, or they haven't done it in a long time, and they like someone, a spiritual director, to kind of help prepare them and go through the retreat and come out the other side.
Mm-hmm.
That has become more central to my retreat leading, and so people will come from out of state and get a cabin or at a retreat center in the area, which we have some wonderful retreat centers all around Colorado Springs. And I help them prepare for it, and then meet with them maybe once or more while they're here,
Yeah.
and then meet with them afterwards.
That's good.
I encourage them 7 days if they can, 5 or 7 days. But if it's only a weekend, hey, that first full 20 hours, 24 hours, that first night, do not set an alarm. Allow yourself to sleep as much as you can, at least 10 hours if possible.
Hmm.
And then when you wake up, just go slow, and don't bring a bunch of books to read. If you bring something to read, let it be something that is for enjoyment, not for producing anything. A novel or some spiritual writing that you find enticing for your love of God, or something less pushy on your being. But
Mm-hmm.
and then whenever a nap starts to happen,
Mm-hmm.
let the nap happen. And if it's more than one, that during that first 24 hours, let it be. But just move into the spaciousness of rest for that first 24 hours. If it's a week long retreat, I'll say, maybe 3-4 nights, do all you can to sleep 10 hours or more. I mentioned to you before, we were talking about it earlier, about how Dallas Willard, in the class that I was in with him, really fortunate to be in his last class that he led at Fuller for this doctoral students. And he looked at it. The first two things out of his mouth, we're all sitting there, like there's 25 or so of us there, and here's Dallas Willard standing right in front of us, and his first words were, "My prayer for each of you is you will never be in a hurry again." And he just stopped, and we kind of all looked at each other like, "Oh wow." And then not long after that, he said something to the effect of, "And here's what I want you to do the first 3 nights of this 2 weeks together in this monastery." He said, "For the first 3 nights, I want you to sleep at least 10 hours a night."
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of chuckles and stuff, because most of us were like, "Yeah, is that going to happen?" But it did.
Right.
Just recently, I learned what happens with our brains when we sleep. And I was so intrigued. I heard the scientists say, yeah, what happens when you go to sleep is, part of what happens is your brain shrinks,
Mm-hmm.
and the fluid around the outer edge of your brain in your skull increases,
Mm-hmm.
and it washes through, and it allows for memories to be instilled for the long haul. It clears out random stuff that doesn't need to be there anymore. Um, and it does all this other stuff. Anyway, what I was saying is that the part of our healing um, comes from that simple resting,
Wow.
and slowing down. And like you said, leaders a lot of times, um, they're driven, and especially, well, any leader who's trying to make a living, whatever leadership they're in, they're if you're going to say yes to a position of leadership, you want to go towards the flame.
Mm-hmm.
You want it. Some people call it taking the bitter pill of that will become my life.
Mm-hmm.
as the founding CEO or the founding pastor of this. The bitter pill is it's all consuming,
Mhm.
and there is no time for stepping back. You have to keep pressing and pushing. And what we know happens to a human in that setting is that we move into energy that is fight or flight. And and after some time, and for some of us it's less time, and others it's a longer time, you discover, oh no, I am not making healthy decisions
Mhm.
because I'm making them out of crisis.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so the resting helps open up that potential to move into other kinds of energy,
Mhm.
some more open compassion, some forgiveness, some peace, some joy, some just being present in the moment. You know, rest can help move us into those
Mhm.
kinds of energies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm listening to you here talking about this wonderful invitation to rest. I, I'm also sitting here thinking, who do I view to be leaders? And that's a really, I think a lot more people are leaders than maybe someone might assume I'm thinking when you and I are talking about leaders. So, a mom and dad who have little toddlers at home.
Yes.
I mean, goodness gracious, I do have
Yes.
I do have grandkids. Todd, I have five, and
Ooh.
just a couple weeks ago over Thanksgiving, we had all five grandkids here, and their ages are 6 and under. And those five kids belong to two of my children. One of my children, who is also in the army, like your son, he and his
Oh.
wife are responsible for four of these children,
Oh.
ages 6 and under.
Wow.
And boy, my wife and I, being in this phase of our life, we raised four kids, but being on the side we're on now, we just watch them going, oh my goodness, how do they do it? How do they get enough sleep? How do they ever find any time? How do they, how do they get restored? Where's their joy coming from? All
Mm.
this. So I think about
Mm.
so many people who like just in their life, it seems like it doesn't work for me to have rest right now. This is the
Mm.
season I'm in, right? And so I think of parents, I think of single moms, I think of just caregivers who are caring for their elderly parents and they're living there with them. I think of ministry
Mm.
leaders and marketplace leaders. I think of so many spheres of people who are leading in some way or another. They're being called upon to care for someone else, and they need to have someone kind of who's tending to them. That idea of who's caring for those who care for others,
Yeah.
and I hear that that's really what you're doing. So I just want to just offer this to those who are listening. If someone listening is sensing right now, Todd, they're sensing I'm tired.
Mm. Mm.
I
Mm.
think I need what Todd is offering. I want that.
Yeah.
What might their first step be? And my question here isn't only how to contact you,
Yeah.
but this is also just a question about how do we what do we do with this noticing I'm tired. My season of life doesn't even really work for me to have this a lot of rest or to go away for a retreat or something. What what can we do? Like, what's the posture of heart that we can begin with?
Yes. Yes. I appreciate what you said. Um, the common understanding of, you know, when we say the word leader, we're thinking of those folks I mentioned earlier, leaders in ministry, leaders in business. But you're right. If you are a parent or someone who really loves your church congregation, as a layperson, if you are a grandparent who is on the journey, you all of you, each of you, you're a leader.
Hmm.
And what we can do best, or one of the things we can do that will help us ourselves as leaders, as humans, as followers in the way of Christ, is to lead ourselves.
Mm.
And if I can lead myself well, I have something to give to my wife and my kids and my neighbors and those I work with. And so, yeah. So I one of the quotes I used a lot. There were two this fall that I used in spiritual direction at the beginning. But one came from Park Palmer. He says, self-care is never selfish.
Mm.
And then he goes on to say something like, I'm paraphrasing, it's tending the one gift that only I can give into this world. Self-care is never selfish.
Mm-hmm.
If it's true care, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, right.
So I guess I would say to that person who might have some tears in their eyes right now, thinking how tired they are and how much they need some healing, some rest. I want to say to that person, your self-care is never selfish. You are a beloved of the one who made the universe and continues to create in it. And you are an important part of that. Give yourself the gift of slowing down to listen for that loving God today.
Mm-hmm.
Set the other stuff aside. And if it means you die somewhere, that was one thing I used to do in local church work when I was tapped out, and I would go somewhere where I could lock a door.
Mm-hmm.
This last church was this beautiful little chapel at the corner of Boulder in Nevada. Our little chapel. I'd go in there if nobody else is in there, and then I'd lock the door, and I would be in just closing my eyes for some time of centering prayer, some silence. I might sing. I might lie down in the pew and take a nap because it overcomes me. And I learn to accept that with grace. And then I get up and I go back to work. So I'm talking to that person who's dried up maybe, or just aching because of the pace that you're in. Please, today, set it aside. And if you can't today, make a plan right now for tomorrow. At least an hour, maybe 2 hours, where you can just be in the presence. And maybe it needs to be somewhere outdoors. Maybe it's a lot of my directees talk about, it's one of the things I love doing is like, hey, where is it that you are most full of joy when you're alone?
Yeah.
And they'll tell me, and so why I ask them that is that, so when I'm praying for you, in my heart and brain and all that I am, when I'm praying for you, you're right there. I see you sitting on that rock just inside the forest behind your parents' house.
Yeah.
On that large boulder and listening to the river that's half a mile away. Or you're on that beach, you're walking at sunset. And so maybe it's place outdoors where you can just be and be with the spirit of the created one, the one that creates in you new life. So that would be one thing. And I believe that retreats are helpful. One reason it's helpful to go on an extended retreat is it provides some heat to your spiritual journey. You get to experiment with some things, some patterns, some practices, and sleep or whatever, and it gives you a chance to start again. And then maybe some of what you're experimenting with when you're on a retreat, as you leave and go back into the world with your family or with your work, you go, okay, I think this practice I just did, I think that might be the one that I want to practice for a while in my everyday life. And so that's one of the reasons I think retreats are important, is that it provides some heat to our to the gestation of our spirits, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
And do contact me, please. Headwatersofhope.org. Go there and you'll find a way to connect with me too.
Headwatersofhope.org.
And I also provide that from a distance as well. I help people where, if they're anywhere in the world, I can help them move towards their retreat, through their retreat, and out of their retreat, wherever they are. So there are ways to do that as well.
That's really good, Todd. I please, you guys listening, guys and girls, Todd strikes. I just know this to be true of you, Todd. The kind of retreat that you would help guide someone in would be a very spacious retreat. It would actually feel restful to be on a retreat that Todd was trying to help you navigate, because that's where everything comes alive. That's where the heat is. So, yeah, definitely everyone reach out to headwatersofhope.org, contact Todd, and see more about his ministry, what he's doing. Again, you do not have to come out to Colorado to engage in a retreat or to have a conversation with Todd. So, Todd, thank you. Thanks for being with us on the Being Formed podcast.
Adam, what an honor. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
All right. Well, God bless you, man. Grace and peace.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Well, as we close, I'm struck again by the gift of being guided, not just taught. We don't need more strategies to keep ourselves in motion. We need invitations that let us stop and breathe and remember who is holding us. Todd's ministry reminds me that formation is not a next task, it's a return to the source, a return to the headwaters, a return to the God who meets us not in our performance, but in our belovedness. If today's conversation has stirred something in you, if you feel tired or numb, or simply aware that you've been living from the edges of yourself rather than your depths, take that as an invitation. Begin with rest. Begin with a long exhale. Begin by telling the truth about where you are. As always, I pray that as you walk away from this episode, you do so a little more awake to the presence of God in your own life and a little more gentle with the place in you that's weary. Until next time, grace and peace.